three nations that by God's ordaining are coexisting together, right? So in the north we have Canada. Here in the middle, so we have us, the United States, and in the south, just down south from us, we have Mexico. One can say that this is really a threefold schedule. This is just archetypical as the constitution of the human being. Steiner, when he speaks about this constitution of the human being, he actually, in different moments, in different lectures, ascribes geographical directions to different parts of our body. So the head is, for Steiner, related to the forces of the north. Forces of the north. The metabolic human being, the will component of our being, which is exact polarity. Here's the roundness, fullness, integrity. The head is, in a certain sense, carried by the entire body. It's a separate organism. Polar to this is the whole metabolic limb system of the human being. So not only inwardly speaking metabolism, outwardly speaking limb system. One versus many limbs. And in that regard, one can imagine even already geographically or in terms of the meteorological, geological circumstances, that the deeper south we go, in the case of North American continent, we go towards Mexico, then we are entering more and more will metabolic element. Warmth, that fire, digestive processes in nature are very, very different than the north, with its kind of generally cooler, colder atmosphere. And here's when we swiftly cross the threshold between the world of senses and the world of thoughts. Of course, you have to imagine that not even human beings think differently, live differently, depending whether they live in a hot desert atmosphere, metabolic character of the landscape, or if they live in cooler, more colder element that is much more intensely permeated with the forces of north. Forces of north, they combine also with the forces of crystallization. I think north, crystals, rocks, snowflakes. This is all spiritually, etherically related to the life ether, form ether. Okay? Whether this is more related to digestive system, related to fire ether, warmth ether. It goes without saying that this part of the continent, culturally and even, of course, politically, is an extension of Europe. Canada also came to being as a kind of reaction towards feudalism and the rule of political atmosphere of Europe a couple hundred years ago. But unlike the United States, they actually never completely relinquished that spiritual, intellectual connection with their motherland. And today you see it. Canada is of course a part of the United Kingdom still, but on their banknotes, they don't have presidents, they have the Queen of England. So you have to think about it that spiritually, intellectually, how people live, how they think, how they etherically are, is way more related to the etheric spiritual constitution of the European humanity than actually American humanity. On the other hand, this South, not only, of course, radically different language. Canadians speak officially English and French. Culturally, one can say that with certain justification, they're closer to us, to the US. Mexico really, not only through that they speak Spanish, which not only the entire Latin America, but the whole South America speaks. Also culturally and historically are coming from a very, very different angle. So in a way one can say that just as the head of the North American continent still belongs culturally to Europe, or at least is open, lends an ear to Europe, the metabolic part of the North American continent is open, just like our border is open, wide open, like our limbs are open, way towards the forces from the south, entire South America, culturally closer to that than to Canada or the US. So this threefoldness is the basis component of these observations. The head, the limbs, and in the middle is this American experiment proper, something which we all struggle with very profusely all the time. The United States, which by definition as a middle in this organism of three, is the soul, is the heart, circulatory member of the human constitution. And just as in breathing or in circulation, it's always twofold. It's beat and pause. Beat and pause, or breath and breath out. Breath and breath out, just examples. This, of course, also etherically manifests in the entire life of the culture of the United States all the way to the political system. So this is the reason why we have mainly two parties only. You can be this or that. You can be a fan of that team or that team, everything. The entire system is based, or is a reflection, maybe I don't think that this is actually intentionally, but it's a reflection of that middle part of the human being. And the third part is, of course, this, the great unknown, the white. So you have a little picture of American flag there too, red, blue, and white. Just like in breathing, you have breath in, red, life. You have breath out, death. But between them is just that pause, that silent middle. So let's wrap it up for a moment and now think only about this component of the threefold organism of the North America. And when you focus only on that, and when you turn it anti-clockwise 90 degrees, you still have these three components. The head component, the middle component, and the metabolic component. But they are now coming not from north-south, but from east to west. And in that regard, East Coast has a very, very different character than the West Coast. Of course, not only geographically, East Coast is way more formed. That element which I described here, this formative, form-giving element that we see in the rocks, in clarity of thinking, in snowflakes, is way more, now of course, regardless of north and south, but in that regard, is way more present in the East Coast. Even looking at the history of this country, coming from east to west. When we look at geography of California and West Coast, it has tendency to disseminate more and more. Disseminate of form. In our neck of the woods here, this assumes an extreme expression in the fact that we are living on two tectonic plates, which are in constant shift and rift and constant movement. And due to that seismic activity, one can say that the matter, the continent is constantly kind of annihilated, chewed, ground, and transformed into dust. So think about that. If anyone had the experience of being or even living in New York City, that polarity is definitely presented in those two cities, very, very acutely. New York City and Los Angeles, the gesture behind New York City, of course it's a tiny little island where everything grows up in very, very crystal-like formative rectangular shapes. You see that activity of thinking incarnated in those buildings of Manhattan. Everything is compressed, everything is sharper because of that. Manhattanite New Yorkers have to be very sharp to survive there. I lived there for 12 years. Here, however, when you look, the second largest city in the United States, it has no boundaries. There's no such thing as LA. There's, of course, LA City and LA County, but you know that there's approximately 50 little or smaller, larger cities that are part of LA. It's a monster. Sepulveda Boulevard weaves 70 miles from north to south. It's for European mind like me, 90 kilometers is impossible. One street that's 90 kilometers. It's incredible. And you know how it goes. It ends here and somewhere else in the city. Oh, there's Sepulveda Boulevard again. Oh, and here's another one. It's the same street all the time. Nobody knows how. So also, just like Manhattan is really kind of a one can have this feeling of the motherboards. Right? Everything is organized. Every square inch of Manhattan is really taken care of. Here, again, that element of fire, of transubstantiation almost, of metabolism, is much more active than that thought element. But that's the first observation, first polarity. One can extend that generally on the entire northeastern United States and southwestern United States. It's polarity. Head, limbs. Right? Another thing, of course, that we often just skip habitually is the fact that this amazing country is stretched or stands between two oceans. And this ocean here is called Atlantic Ocean, right? So what is the word Atlantic coming from?
Atlantis?
Yeah. Right? And this one is called Pacific, right? Atlantic Ocean is, in a sense, as a pond that they call in the East Coast. Pond that divides Mother Europe from the new land. And this is that part of the earth that since the primordial time, at least from the time of Plato, although we know that Plato was of course educated in Heliopolis by the Egyptian sages, he himself points out that the continent once existed between what today is Europe and North America. At least according to his indications, we would today assume that he was speaking about North America. We'll talk about it too. And it exists in nomenclature. Everyone knows Atlantic Ocean, nobody has a problem. That it's named after the continent that is supposed to be mythological. This Pacific Ocean is of course huge, the largest that there is, I believe, and the entire west coast of the United States is part of what is called in geography the Ring of Fire. You know that, right? The Ring of Fire. So this outline, so to speak, or the vessel where Pacific Ocean is extremely tectonically and volcanically active. More so in the east, especially, of course, Hawaii is part of it. We have few volcanoes. The last big eruption was, I think, was Mount Helen, right? So now in the 80s, it really shook significantly. The few volcanoes that are inactive. Volcanoes, volcanoes have this very strongly metabolic nature. You know the mechanism behind how they work? Just very quickly, but I think it's important what you're saying. So this is based on the theory of tectonic plates, right? So this brilliant theory, brilliant discovery, the entire surface of the Earth is actually floating everywhere. We float. It's not a solid state as we would think, but Earth, the element of Earth is actually huge plates, and they move according to their own inherent laws. And this is the let's say the middle ridge of the ocean here, where very strongly underwater Earth creative processes take place. So you can imagine that the entire ridges that are under oceans, they're huge ridges, you can see them on mountain ranges. They're actually living open volcanoes, as if, that constantly emit living new earth. Just like in our bones, in the marrow, blood is being produced. This is basalt. And because of that, the plates are built, created, and moreover, they're being pushed constantly from the center, from the heart of the oceans, towards the continents. Because that production, that new blood is being generated all the time. So what happens if they're being pushed and pushed constantly? They're younger, they're softer, so to speak, and they crush against harder, older plates, or parts of the plates. And when this occurs, they literally swim or collapse under the harder, older plates. Okay? Can you imagine that? Continents happen to be older plates from that perspective. So these younger plates push under the older plates, and they once in a while cause mechanic reaction. We call it
earthquake.
Yeah. But the question is, what is happening with that? There's such incredible amount of pressure that it literally melts again those newly hidden parts of the earth. There's pressure and fire there that has to find exit. And this exit, the valves, the great valves in the body organism of the earth are volcanoes. That's why very often, especially in the ring of fire, they are along the coast. So when this is melted under incredible pressure of earth, will find its outlet through volcanic eruptions. This entire character of fire, of grinding, of metabolism, brings us or testifies, is a memory of the earth, of the times where earth was not so formed yet. Right? It's kind of an echo, far echo of the times which we call in anthroposophy the Lemurian times and preceding that. The time when earth, especially element of fire was prevailing. This is something that, for instance, in the biblical language is depicted behind the fiery sword of the cherub that guards the entrance to the paradise. Paradise, one can imagine, was at some point an oasis of peace. surrounded by incredibly strong processes of fire and magma, volcanic processes. In itself, it was an echo of yet older epoch. This all is still, in a way, carried in the memory, etheric memory of the land where we live, Lemuria. And you see it in different places. For instance, in La Brea tar pits. This is an echo of Lemuria, or echo, I mean, in Lemurian times, the Prim, according to regular nomenclature, when the forest, the life forces were so potent and so powerful, they grew forests so big that today, entire content of petroleum all over the world is a consequence of those formations. But if you would calculate the amount of petroleum that we have used and we have on Earth and project it on the growth of the forest that we have today, it doesn't calculate. Okay, this is one big problem for the scientists. It doesn't calculate because they calculated that the amount of woods and forest and plant substance that would have to create this under-earth sea of petroleum would have to be so big as from Earth extending to the sun. There is no forest like this, so imagine we have to take this literally, that in Lemurian time, the Earth did not have a shape and didn't look like it looks today. It literally still extended partially all the way as a sphere to the sun. So the plant world there was something completely different. Collapsed, and we see a bunch of it in La Brea tars, among many other places. California, Southern California, until petroleum was discovered in Texas, was the main source of petroleum in North America. You see it in those prints and imprints of those antediluvian animals with amazing collection of bones, dinosaur bones, great tigers and so on. This is all related to our region. Extends all the way through a Great Basin, because you can imagine that all the way to the continental divide. This is still actually part of Lemuria, especially in what is called the Los Angeles Basin. And I mentioned that already, but it's a very important fact for us that this part where we live is literally a different tectonic plate. Los Angeles Basin, Los Angeles is on a different, its own tectonic plate, which is not a part of the North American tectonic plate. It's amazing. That means that from somewhere here, the tectonic plate swam for thousands, millions of years and decided to crush, and the place where they crush and they keep crushing is called San Andreas Fault. This movement of the plates and that tension, that grinding, remember I told a few times, this metabolic character of grinding, matter literally is being ground here, chewed on. This is happening right across the valley, going towards the Antelope Valley, and the movement between these two plates is north-south. So when they move like this. They're moving all the time, right? Okay? They tear, they grind like this. And that San Andreas Fault goes all to California, San Francisco and north. So this entire part of California is of foreign origin. It is a remnant of Lemuria that crushed, connected with North American continent. And this is why things that are conceived and thought and lived in California are so radically different than anywhere else in the world, including the United States of America. There is a call, paradisal call for us to be here. People want to come to California, and then they are very often very surprised or disappointed that that paradise that we have longing towards was supposed to be here. We instinctively look for it, but it's not necessarily so pretty, right? Because of course, between Lemuria and now, there's a whole world karma that happened, including the karma of Atlantis. And just as you know that the Lemurian continent was taken down or perished mainly due to the activity of the element of fire. So the Atlantic continent, the entire Atlantean epoch of human culture and becoming was taken down by the element of
Water.
what?
Water.
Yeah, this is something.
Water.
This is what is known in Judeo-Christian myth as the Great Flood. The Great Flood, with the story of Noah, which is known in probably all languages and ancient cultures, Manu in India, Anathraxas in Persia, all cultures have the echo and the picture of the flood and Noah. So we have to imagine this flood and this great rain of 40 days as something different than just the rains that we had for the last 80 days here. And Rudolf Steiner describes that. This is an amazing picture that he brings. Between this condition and state of Earth and cosmos and human being, and this, human beings were not yet entirely incarnated on Earth the way we are. That means that we have very different constitution, chemical, physical even. It's so radical. He speaks about a great ocean of albumin, of protein, where all creation was suspended. If there is any talk, Steiner says, about solid ground, is to imagine it as a gelatinous, semi-watery substance, gaseous water. Elements are not yet separated too, the way they are today. Then at some point, there was a great precipitation. First the plant, then the mineral plant and animal forms due to calcaic or lime rains, so he calls it lime rains, literally precipitate. And as the last precipitation of the great, rain of albumin is human being with skeleton, which is a human being that is then only subject to forces of nature that we today are subject to. Noah is the great initiate who brings that cosmic all fullness of Atlantean period, literally puts it into a casket of the human form, into the ark, and leads the humanity from Atlantis first to far Asia, and from there back towards the west. So the echo of this great catastrophe of Atlantis is still very much active in the Atlantic region, and especially in the East Coast. Okay, so how can we see it? Just as our biggest problem is heat, lack of water, and earthquakes, not so much volcanoes, that serves the east, right? Extreme heat. Their problem is, of course, much more. So here is warmth element, fire element, and earth element. There, the issues are always related. Atmospheric issues are related to hurricanes, to great tornadoes, cyclones. Between June and October, poor Florida is always decimated. So that's the element of air and water. So you see how this is a memory of Earth. In these processes, here in the heat waves, in desert, in tremors, you know that there's approximately 300, 400 tremors every 24 hours in LA. We simply don't feel them unless you're more sensitive than others. I had animals at home, my kids had a rat at some point, and there are moments that the rat is very nervous. Why? Because animals feel the tremors. It's 300 of them. There's a tremor right now here. Once in a while, there's strong enough that we can feel them. earth and fire element, right? And there, again, great distractions. Remember Katrina, all these, they always name those hurricanes with beautiful names, you know. There's memory of earth active in those things. They're beings, actually. Meteorologists or, you know, FEMA, they don't see that when they call the cyclone Katrina or whatever, that they actually see a being. It's kind of belonging to the wrong times, or is active in wrong times. Cyclones like that were very appropriate and normal in the Atlantean epoch. Everything was in a state of creative chaos. Yeah. We're gonna just focus now on here in the Southern California. So again, we would have to move this another 90 degrees, so to speak, right? Counterclockwise. And now we have blue, more heady, more organized, actually, you know, in Northern California, and more fiery, more metabolic in Southern California. In and around LA and going to San Diego. You can see that Berkeley is actually the most important place in the history of the second part of the 20th century for sure. Stanford, those places are shaping not only the cultural, political landscape of America, but the entire Western world. Such incredible, potent center here in the Bay Area. And of course, extension of that today is not only politics that we have, the entire politics that we have nowadays was conceived in Berkeley, but in the 60s and following. But the Silicon Valley, so that Stanford extension, combined with these elemental forces, that everything is possible, that dream, California dream, that Lemurian dream, there is no limits actually, there is no form. Silicon Valley could exist only in Northern California. Just as much Hollywood, which is that, except on a level of culture, could only exist in Southern California. You have to understand that those things, what's happening in Silicon Valley / Berkeley, reverberates and rays out the entire modern world, just as what's coming out of Hollywood, and by design also means entire audiovisual market and business, is doing the same thing all over the world, sending the message of the beautiful California dream. Taiwan, China, Mongolia, Poland, Russia, just wherever you want. There are two kind of modern chakras, modern centers where the American spirit, which is a very interesting being according to Rudolf Steiner, is exerting its influence, cultural, intellectual influence on the entire civilization of 20th and 21st century going forward. Rudolf Steiner spoke about angels of nations, remember that? That just as you have an angel, I have an angel hopefully, also nations have their archangels. And in regards to this American spirit, Rudolf Steiner speaks very cryptic words, that it's actually an archai. It's a being that was supposed to or should be on the level of archai, the spirit of time, but stayed behind on the level of the national spirit of nation. Just like every spirit of nation, every archangel fits, so to speak, into a form of the language, culture, maybe even national borders, more or less, as of course there's a human karma involved in that too. Archai is a spirit of time, and this American spirit works as an archangel, but actually is much higher than that. It's actually a spirit of time. So you can imagine that these two centers, Silicon Valley or the entire Bay Area and Hollywood, are the two eyes of the spirit of time / archangel that are looking and sending rays all over the planet. And this is the character of America, and Americanism, Pax Americana, that we don't have borders, we don't have boundaries, because only seemingly American phenomenon can be contained to actual physical space of an ocean, between ocean and ocean. That alone is a kind of a picture of imagination. There is no borders. The angel of the nation actually works through time rather than space. Manifests itself in time. That means it's something that the Rostand even warned before the Second World War. Anthroposophism, a priest of the Christian communities. It's very soon, and obviously he meant the Second World War, the whole situation with Hitler and so on. Very soon, Europe will still cease to exist as an independent creation. It will be an extension of America. Today, that extension is everywhere, all over the world. Maybe perhaps with the exception of Russia. Now we're going to limit even more. We're doing another 90 degrees long, enough. So this really amazing character of our city. And it took me a while really to realize, and it took me a while, I'm always a little bit surprised to realize how amazing it is that we are surrounded by those hills, by the mountains. Because of course, when I was coming here, I always thought I'm going near the ocean, that source of light, eternal light, that Lemurian element. It took me a while to wake up, and I live when I in the valley. When I look through the windows in North Hills, I see those hills. I only started seeing them maybe in the third year of being here. Fascinating. And then of course I realized that the entire San Fernando Valley is actually one big crater, as if, right, surrounded by these hills. And you can even see it on the map. So this is going towards Ventura, right? This is Santa Susana. And this is Santa Monica Mountains. Now, of course, we're so used to this Santa, this, Santa, that. Make an effort sometimes and investigate the meaning behind these words that we're using here. Who was Santa Monica? Saint Monica. Yeah? So this will bring me to the core and the bottom of this talk. I think 1711, when Los Angeles was actually founded, established. The Franciscan friars, who had this incredible call to civilize, differently than conquistadors, differently than Jesuits in South America. They really had it as a mission to organize something in what they consider pure chaos of nature. One has to always ask, where are the sources, where are the origins of these intentions? Is it the general of the abbot of the order? Is it the king here and there? Or when you really extend that Anschauen der Urteilskraft and go beyond, then you always at some point will find an incredible source of inspiration behind these decisions. For instance, an example from the north. The conquistadors were roaming away from the Bay Area, and they were following the Sacramento River, and at some point they came to the moment when the Sacramento River connects with the American River, and they sat there in awe of beauty. And the leader said, this is just like the Holy Sacrament. This is como Santo Sacramento. The name Sacramento today is the echo of the word of his experience. So at the end, at the bottom, we have human beings with their experiences, with their intuitions. Of course, they were not so intellectual as we are today, but they were driven to come here instinctively by the spiritual world. And that story, with the founding of Los Angeles, is the most fascinating story. They found a place, and today it's downtown, which was nearest to the Los Angeles River. It's called today Los Angeles River. It comes, of course, from Sierra Nevada, great artery before it was adulterated like it is today, really bringer of life. They found a small, tiny, flat place that they decided they can build kind of a construction mechanism that will allow them to draw water from the river with buckets. Before all this happened, actual founding, like founding of the community took place. This was organized by the governor of New Spain, which later became Mexico. They called and chose exactly 44 people as the original dwellers of this new pueblo, community pueblo. 44, not 55, not 33, not 41, but 44. How precise were they selecting the candidates? There were exactly 11 men married to exactly 11 women. That all these couples had exactly altogether 22 children, 11 boys and 11 girls. What do you think when you hear that? This something so formative, something so precise, mathematically precise, spiritual, that lay at foundation. There's nothing random here. So when you think this 44, this is now more imaginative geometry, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4. 44 is the kind of imaginative picture of a cube. All right. So a cube is, of course, the picture of the New Jerusalem. When you look at the chapter 21, 22 of the book of Revelation of John, the shape of the city is 4 square and its sides are equal. So it's based on the spiritual number of 44. Whether these prayers knew that or acted out of instinct, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that they planted a cube of an element of salt, of formative forces at the get-go, at the root of what became the second largest city in the United States so far. There's an intention, spiritual thought as the foundation stone behind the city. Second device of that is, of course, the name that they used for our city, which is El Pueblo or El Ciudad, El Pueblo de Nuestra Señora Reina de los Ángeles. The community, the village, the city of Our Lady, the Queen of Angels. So, what is that Our Lady of Queen of Angels? When you look into Catholic worship and their understanding of the hierarchies, this is nothing else but a aspect of the Sophian being, the wisdom of God. The Queen of the Angels is a being where one can imagine that provides kind of a spiritual form for entire hierarchies, for all hierarchies. This is the wisdom of God, right? The highest spiritual cosmic emanation of Mary, the Mother of God. The starry Sophia with 12 stars around her head. So they took not any saints or not any instant, but they called all the way to the highest feminine aspect of the divinity, to the Sophian Sophianic being, and called the name of the city, dedicated this new pueblo to her. And it's just on one hand a great tragedy, on the other hand it's of course the proof of the working of the karma, that not only this grand regal name was contracted to Los Angeles of the angels, but actually in our time it is contracted to the 2 letters which, as you know, as anthroposophists, are the initials of the adversaries. So there is a hidden message there. There is a hidden gem there. And there's a karma, very, very precise. When we learn to see with Goethe's eyes, this entire intention laid out for you and for us, for many after us. Why are we here in Los Angeles? It's a spiritual task. Some were born, most of us came looking for paradise, but we actually are nowadays, of course, play things that were appropriate in bygone eras and times. Today they must inevitably present themselves as adversarial forces. So what was light, what was darkness in its right emanation in Atlantis and in Lemuria today must work adversarial conditions. And we see it everywhere where you go.
LA is also Lemuria, Atlantis.
Yeah, that too. So, but the task here is to really redeem that and to redeem those Lemuric, Atlantean, Luciferic, Ahrimanic tendencies and karma, and to open up, allowing the highest wisdom of God, Sophia, to actually take her rightful place and throne. And this is why we're here, by the way. This is why we're also here in this chapter. I'm indebted for that knowledge. I didn't invent that. This was given to me by our dear Michael Son, passed not long ago. He initiated me in that mystery of the name right at the beginning of my time here. So that's his legacy. Thank you, Michael. And he was very dear to him. Very dear to him. Michael would say, his sister would ask him, why are you going to the desert all the time? You're not afraid you're going to get lost or your car's going to get destroyed? And he would just say, he loved going to the desert. Mary, he says, Mary, the desert looks different every minute. And Michael was able to see with his eyes the spiritual process behind light and darkness. Both America, North and South America, are characterized by the chains, mountain chains, going north to south. Sierra Nevada, the Sierras in the entire South America, going all the way to Cape Horn. It's all going south to north to south, and particularly in the west coast of both Americas. In Europe, the gesture is exactly opposite. The mountains in Central Europe, Alps particularly, are going more or less, of course, east to west. Carpathians turn this way a little bit, that's why Slavic people are always a little bit off. All the way to Ural Mountains, right, which separate Europe in Russia, Russian Europe, with Asian Europe, Asia and Russia. But here we have just handful, if any, mountains that go east to west. And fascinatingly, this handful is actually mostly right around us. So the so-called transverse mountains, Santa Susana being part of it, and Santa Monica, are likely either only or one of few mountains in both Americas that have this gesture of European gesture of east to west. Right? You can see it in Santa Monica, Sepulveda Pass. It's just like, you shall not pass. You have to drill through it. Grapevine too. It's a threshold. You have to push through that threshold when you go from the valley, from the north towards Los Angeles Basin. What is a threshold? Threshold is always a moment of consciousness, of waking up. And this is truly something I experience here in LA, that we are here actually at the cross. And those transverse mountains that stop this flow, etheric magnetic flow of the Sierra Nevada, the rocky Sierra Nevada, and later going towards Mexico, the Baja and everything. This is the only reason those mountains, that culture actually could emerge here. Why? Rudolf Steiner connects these, the placement of the chain, mountain chains, with the working of the electromagnetic being in us. He calls this electromagnetic being in us the double, the doppelganger. Every human being, regardless of gender, place of birth, race, we're all are characterized by presence of a being that connects to an incarnating soul, incarnating human being. Shortly before birth, a being, kind of a symbiotic, maybe even parasitic being, connects to your spiritual being, your soul. A big amount of our human drama on earth is to be able, especially today, to recognize what in me is eternal being, spiritual being, and what in me is the double. Now, the intensity of the working of this double, Rudolf Steiner connects with geography of Earth, particularly with the placement of the mountain chains. And you can see it even on modern maps of Earth's magnetism, that the highest magnetism of Earth all over the world is around where we live, which means that our double here is very much at home. In other words, I can say that we are here generically all asleep. This is a big mystery. We're all asleep here. It's just a given fact of geography, of nature. Now, of course, in that statement, we're all asleep, there's an entire spectrum of what does it mean. I'm saying all this just to indicate, our work here, spiritual, anthroposophical work as esoteric Christian, as a Christian community, has a very, very different meaning and dimension and requirements than anywhere else in the world. And yet, because of this cross, our community, Los Angeles, is under the cross. This is still possible. The influences, they're an echo of what Rudolf Steiner says pre-Columbian Mexican mysteries would be so strong that no culture could exist here. So this is the threshold. And you can see it even in the geography of our lovely hills here, how this threshold, that combined with the names of the saints, you can research it yourself. Who are these saints? Santa Monica, the mother of Augustine, Santa Susana, one of the original martyrs who was beheaded because she didn't want to turn back to paganism. All those things are intentional names. The San Gabriel Mountains, the mountains of San Gabriel, Archangel Gabriel, San Rafael Hills, Verdugo, I'm sure, has another name too. They're significant names, right? Including the fact that here Santa Monica Mountains extend underwater, and those three islands that you know there as Santa Cruz, Santa Rosa, and San Michael, they are actually three ridges of Santa Monica Mountains. But look at the names. Santa Cruz is the cross, Saint Cross, Holy Cross. Santa Rosa is the Rose Cross, and San Michael, San Miguel Mountain, the last one is of Saint Michael, right, of Archangel Michael. So we have this cross with roses dedicated to Michael, so to speak, the protector of the cosmic divinity out of which this city here was based and founded. This is not the end of it. This is just the beginning of this great purification where these adversarial forces can actually elevate themselves and reveal the path towards the wisdom of God. The last thing is this, I just had this imagination when you look at the geology of these mountains. This is San Gabriel, this is Santa Susana, Santa Monica, so this is San Fernando Valley, right? Our community, our church, is more or less somewhere here, right? And when you actually see this as a sort of a head of a snake, so that's Gabriel and going towards San Bernardino Mountains, and then there's Santa Ana Mountains and San Diego Mountains, everything. This really looks, from a certain point of view, like a, you know, head of a snake or a dragon. And here, right at the place where the dragon is trying to learn how to speak, in the place of the word, your church was established and built, purchased out of divine wisdom. Every Sunday we gather here and hear the word of God reminding us what the true purpose of cultural life, spiritual life in LA is.
Okay.
In reality, this would be, in reality, you know, according to what I was saying, this would be actually here. This cross is bald on them here, so our church is actually here, more or less. Right? Okay. Yes, John.
Did the Spanish founders know about the esoteric significance of everything that you talked about?
That's my question. I think, you know, people were much more instinctively connected to the spiritual world just a few hundred years ago. There still are some. So those things would be really just manifested out of the sheer will. That's one option. The other is that they had, you know, maybe grades of initiation, and someone there, through their prayer, through their devotion, would be able to really seed that idea. Kind of apocalyptic vision of the world. You know? Now think about it. You know how important it is that the Christian community is here. If you take these two organs, there's only 3 Christian communities in California. One is in Sacramento, one is in San Francisco, and the third one is here. So there, where these influences are going all through cosmos, all through material world today, these 2 organs, meaning the active consecration movement in LA and in San Francisco, are actually pouring the forces of renewal, the forces of the risen one, along with these decadent forces that are streaming from Netflix and Silicon Valley. That's incredibly important. If we would be able to actually grasp the importance of that, our life as a community would be very, very different. But it's okay. It takes time. It will take time, and it's modest. Our work is modest. We're not here to be some sort of a mega church, to promote sensationalism. But it is important that the services are taking place here every week, more or less, since 1957. I can reverse that question and say, what would the world be if these communities would not be found and carried by people like you and I? We don't know, but you can imagine that the world could look very, very different. That's how we have to think about work. It's not a personal interest and, I chose this and that spirituality. No, those times are long gone. We live in the time of the apocalypse. And out of the goodwill of a handful of people, the world can still go forth.